Welcome to my CCENT CCNA ICND1. This is going to be Chapter 7, Installing and Operating a Cisco LAN Switch. Alright, so keep in mind this is from the Odom 2013 Cisco CCENT CCNA ICND1 100-101 exam. Alright, so in this chapter we're going to be looking at accessing a 2960 and doing some basic configuring for a Cisco iOS. Again, our Cisco 2960 comes in multiple flavors. And normally what you'll end up getting if you buy it brand new should be the actual device. It's a console cable, a power cable, maybe rubber feet, documentation, some cable guides, some mounting brackets, and some typical screws. It's important to point out that on the front portion of the switch, you're going to have some LEDs, and they're going to be different modes. And so the first one will be our system. That implies the overall system status. So the second button should be our redundant power supply, assuming it has a redundant power supply. Third one will be our status. Normally, if on green, that implies each port LED implies support status. Next is duplex. Green is full. If it is off, it could mean half duplex. Speed, normally if we're looking at flash and green, it's gigabit. If it's solid green, maybe 100 megabit. If it's off, it's 10 megabit. This one's subjective, like you need to check the documentation per your switch to make sure. The mode will help you cycle through the different modes. And then the individual ports themselves should have different meanings and different colors depending on what mode you're in. So keep that in mind. Moving on is accessing our CLI. Normally, if we're connecting to our Cisco 2960 switch, we're connecting via some type of console cable from our physical machine to its physical port. Or you could actually do a telnet or virtual session to the management IP address of the device, assuming it is set up. So console connections to a switch, that could be done through a serial port on one side, RJ45 on the other. That's the most common. We actually have a USB to RJ45 console cable. We also have a USB to a USB console. Those are all different common ways to do this. The terminal settings, normally we are looking at a direct console. We're looking at a data rate of 9600. The data bits will be 8, the stop bit will be 1, and there should be no parity. So how do we configure this? So to go from our console, we could set a console password, or if we're doing a telnet, we could do a VTY password or virtual terminal password. Alright, so I went ahead and brought up Packet Tracer. I'm going to add a 2960 switch in here. I'm going to double click on it. Physically, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so that we can see it. There are the ports that they were talking about. There's the mode. Here are our 24 ports. And I'm connected to the CLI. First thing to talk about is the different mode. If we are at a caret, we are in our user mode. To go from a user mode to a privilege mode, we need to type enable. Notice the prompt changes from caret to a pound. So now we have some more features we can play with. Question mark will give us context help. So if we just do a straight question mark, we'll get commands. If we do a partial command and a question mark, we'll get that specific command's help. And so we have a limited amount of actions that we can do. We cannot currently configure this globally for certain configurations for the unit as a whole. To do that, we need to go to our configure terminal. Hit enter, and you'll notice the prompt now changes. I'm going to do question mark again, and you'll notice I have a lot more commands now. So we had talked about configuring our console. So how we do that is if we go to line console 0, you'll notice that changes us to a configure-line. That will allow us to put a password on our console. And how we do that is just password and the password. I like to type in login here so that we know we're going to present the password at login. All right, so that's done for our console. I'm going to type exit. It'll go back one line. And now I'm going to do a line VTY. Oh, helps if I spell line correctly. I'm going to hit enter. It says it's incomplete. That's because we have to tell it a little bit more information. So question mark. We can actually set the different virtual connections or the virtual terminals, and we have between 0 and 15. So we can set different passwords per different virtual terminal. So I'm going to do 0 space 15, and I'm going to set all of them to the same one. And I'll do password class and login. Now we've done basic passwords for our console and our VTY. All right, so moving on. User and enable are different privilege modes. You actually have to type enable to go from a user mode to a privilege exec mode. Our slides want to call them enable mode, but their real name is the privilege exec mode. Now, if we want to navigate between the different modes, again, we're looking at the prompts. When you type a password, there will never be a password like count or anything. It'll just be all blank spaces. You won't notice that. Reload will actually reload your device because it's contextual, meaning reload cannot be issued at that prompt. Reload can only be issued at that prompt. That way you can only issue commands at certain levels. Again, question mark is your friend. If you need help, you can do question mark. So again, to go from our user mode to our privilege exec mode, it's enable. To go from our privilege exec mode to being able to configure it, we're going to do configure terminal. And here we go, enable configure terminal. That allows us to do some basic items. One thing that is important is if you fat finger something, for example, I know it is configure terminal, but what happens if I misspell it? Configure terminal with an E. Sometimes if you try to do something, it may actually try looking up the command. So have to be aware of that. So if we're configuring a terminal, it will allow us to connect back and forth between our privilege exec mode and our global config mode. So you can actually go in, you can configure an interface type and address, VLANs, consoles, lots of different things. When you're completely done, you can actually go and type exit to exit out of each of these modes, or if you type end, it will actually kick you all the way back out to our enable mode. All right, moving on, the different types of switch memory. So there are 4 major types of switch memory. RAM, that's going to be our working memory. It's also where it stores the running configuration. Flash is where it stores our Cisco's iOS. Memory is where it will be loaded into. ROM will be the bootstrap program and our post program. NVRAM will be our startup configurations. These are important to know because I'll ask you questions about, well, what's stored in this type of memory. So you need to know. So a common question is running config versus startup config. It's not Juniper, so we're not going to talk about candidate configs or rollback configs. We're going to keep it very simple. Running and startup. Startup config is the initial configuration that could be saved prior, and it's loaded out from NVRAM. Running config will be all current changes made to the startup config that you have not saved. So, normally when you configure a device, you are configuring its running config. If you want to save it, you save it to startup. That way the next time the device starts up, it will load your current config. Locations for copying information, like a running config, could be a TFTP or NVRAM, depending on how you have it called. That way, if you want to copy the running config from the TFTP program, that works. All right, lastly is this setup mode. Normally, it'll power on the device. It'll check its NV memory. It'll go through its post, it'll go through its bootstrap. Then it'll try to load. Once it's actually done loading the operating system, it will look at is NVRAM empty. If it's not empty, then it'll look at the startup config and it'll change that to the running config. If NVRAM is empty, it'll prompt you, do you want to go enter a setup mode? If you don't want to do the setup mode, it will complete the iOS initialization. If you do want to enter a setup mode, it'll ask you some basic questions. And then again, it'll then move you into the new configuration. That's a basic setup for our Cisco switch. Thank you.